Welcome back from Pilot Training Solutions. Here is another extract from our up-and-coming IFR Procedures App, which, by the way, is taking a little longer than we figured as we can't seem to stop adding additional content to it. This time, we'll be tackling one of the hardest approaches in the world, and definitely one of the most complicated in the US. I am referring to the VOR DME Zulu to runway 15 into Martin State, Maryland, KMTN. Now, keep in mind that because this is an extract from our app, it might refer to previous content, which obviously is not part of this video. Also, to make your life easier, we included a link to the actual approach plate in the description below the video. Printing it out and having it in front of you will probably help you understand this video a lot better. So, let's get to executing this incredibly demanding approach. Now that we have discussed both VOR approaches and DME arcs, let's go over one of the toughest VOR approaches in the world, the VOR DME Zulu to Martin State, Maryland. This approach is characterized by a DME arc final approach segment with multiple step-down fixes. This is already complicated enough, but if by any chance you need to go missed, to reach the missed approach holding, you are required to execute a secondary DME arc. As mentioned before, the more complicated an IFR procedure is, the more important it becomes to properly execute the 6 T's: turn, time, twist, throttle, talk, track. Let's assume that while we are proceeding from Baltimore VOR to Slough intersection, we receive this clearance from ATC. November 123 Papa Tango, proceed to Slough intersection, maintain 3,000 feet until established, cleared for the approach. As usual, let's take a look at the approach plate and highlight all the pertinent information. The most important things to note on the approach plate are the frequency of the final approach nav aid, in this case 115.1 Baltimore, which should already be set on VOR number 1 as we are proceeding outbound on the 334 radial towards Slough. The final approach course inbound, which in this case is the arc itself and will therefore keep changing. So let's just note the DME arc's distance of 14.7. The various step-down fixes with respective altitudes and radials. The first one is Cumbie intersection at 2,600 feet on a radial of 021, followed by Goves intersection, which is also the final approach fix, 1,800 feet and a radial of 039. Next is Zovap at an altitude of 1,260 feet and radial of 047. And the last fix, the missed approach point, identified by the 060 radial at its MDA of 900 feet. Finally, since the missed approach procedure is also quite complicated, let's highlight that as well. We will be making a climbing right turn to 2,500 feet via the Baltimore radial 068 until reaching 11 DME, and then follow the arc clockwise to Boast intersection, identified by the 108 radial from Baltimore and the 055 radial from Andrews Vortac, ADW. Let's first set the radios and navs for the approach, then shoot the approach, and then finally execute the missed approach. On COM 1, we should have Potomac approach, 119.0, while on COM 1 standby, we should have Tower, 121.3. COM 2 should be set to ATIS for monitoring, 124.925, and on standby, I again like to back up the primary frequency we're using, so 119.0, Potomac approach, just in case we make a mess of the frequencies. Nav 1 should be obviously set to Baltimore VOR, 115.1 and identified. Nav 1 standby can be set to Andrews, 113.1. This is not really necessary as we'll never switch Nav 1 during the entire approach, but having a backup again never hurts. Nav 2 can be set to either 115.1 or 113.1. If we know for sure that we will not be going missed, say the cloud bases are at 2,500 feet, we might as well set Nav 2 to Baltimore. But if the weather is close to minimums, or we're either executing the approach for practice and or doing our check ride, then it will be better to set it to Andrews 113.1, as we will be needing it for the mist, and setting it already will give us a better chance of not forgetting to identify it. Because of the complicated missed approach procedure, we'll probably forget to do so, and in any case, it would be an unnecessary distraction. Since we are going to shoot the full approach, let's set Nav 2 to 113.1. And why not? let's twist the OBS to the 055 radial already for the most intersection, so that once identified, we need to do nothing else to it for the entire approach. Nav2 standby will instead be set to Baltimore on 115.7, again, just for backup. Finally, we set the DME to Baltimore and identified that as well. And remember that the code on a DME is only broadcast every 30 seconds. So, now that we are all set up, let's get to shooting the actual approach. While en route to Slough, our attention should be divided between the altimeter, 2-3 seconds, maintain 3,000 feet as instructed by ATC, VOR number 1's needle, 1-2 seconds, keep it centered on 334, the heading indicator, 1-2 seconds if the VOR needle is centered, if not, probably a little bit more, maintain a heading of 334 plus minus any wind correction. That will be followed by the DME, 1 second to gauge the remaining distance to the 14.7 DME arc. Finally, 1-2 seconds on the remaining supporting instruments, starting with the attitude indicator. While proceeding to Slough, let's already start thinking about the procedure. For example, by looking at the radial we're on, the 334, and the first step-down fix radial of 021, we can already see that we will be going clockwise on the arc. And the first selection on the OBS, once we approach the arc, should probably be the 341. Generally, we would twist 10 degrees, but because, again, the first relevant radial on the approach will be 021, which identifies the Cumby intersection, let's give us a heads up and twist it 341, and then back to the 10 degrees at a time until Cumby. Also, when we reach Slough, we will be able to descend to 2,600 feet, because we will be established and have been cleared for the approach. Finally, we can see that this approach requires DME and no timing. This allows us to eliminate one of the T's, the time T. So now the 6 T's become 5, and our workload is reduced. As we reach a distance of about 14 DME, we will go through the 5 T's. But again, as mentioned on the DME arc slide, to make our life easier, we will invert the turn with the twist. So, twist, yes, as mentioned earlier, to 341. Turn, yes, to 071. Again, just follow the deflection dots on the side of the needle to find a 90-degree angle of intercept heading of 071. Throttle, yes, power slightly out for a gentle descent to 2,600 feet. Considering the distance to the next fix, and the fact that we only need to lose 400 feet, if we just reduce the power by 200-300 RPM, we will not need any change to pitch or trim. And once we reach about 2,650, we will just add that power back, reducing again the workload. Talk, time permitting, and ahead of the plane, as usual, advise ATC you're established on the arc. Finally, track. Well, kind of. Let's take a look at our scan. 1-2 seconds on, you guessed it, the altimeter. Make sure you are descending, but not below 2,600 feet. 1-2 seconds on the DME, maintain 14.7. 1-2 seconds on the DG. If at 14.7 DME, maintain 071. If greater than 14.7, then turn towards the VOR. VOR on the right side, turn 20 degrees to the right. Maybe a 090 heading. If less than 14.7, then a left turn to, let's say, 050. Now, 1-2 seconds on the needle, using our usual method. If on the right, then we're flying the same heading as where the needle is, 070 on the DG, and the needle points to 070. If on the left, we passed it. Finally, 1-2 seconds on the supporting instruments. When the needle centers, we rinse and repeat. Twist to 351, turn, follow the deflection dots to a heading of 081, throttle, probably back to the approach setting, we should already be at 2,600 feet, talk, only if we haven't already, track, look at the DME, and wait for the needle to center. We keep rinsing and repeating until the 021 radial centers. When it does, we will again throttle down, but this time more than 200 RPM, as the distance is shorter and the altitude to lose is greater. By the time we reach the 039 radial, we should be at 1,800 feet, so we're looking at a 700 feet per minute descent. And because of this, we will now include the VSI in our scan, and actually start our scan from there.
1 2 seconds with the rest of the scan unaltered. Also, this time, why not twist to 029 instead of 031? Again, because the next step down fixed is the 039 radial. Once the 039 radial centers, we will now follow the same procedure as we did for the Goves intersection, with a 700 foot per minute descent, and this time a twist to 047 for ZOVAP. Keep in mind that as we get closer to the ground, our scan should focus more and more on the altimeter. So from ZOVAP to the missed approach point, the altimeter should be your starting point for your scan, with 2-3 seconds on that, followed by the rest of the instruments. Make sure you never go below 1260 feet until ZOVAP, and not below 900 feet until VFR conditions. As usual, if you're already IFR rated, then add 200-300 feet to those altitudes. If not, then add at least 50 feet to them. At ZOVAP, we will now twist to 060, and again follow the balls to the heading of 150. Descend to 900 feet, and wait for the needle to center, at which point we will execute our mist.
Now let's proceed on the mist approach, which is just as complicated as the approach itself, if not more. If we know or suspect that we will be executing the mist in advance, the weather's close to minimums, we're just practicing, or this is your check ride, the best thing to do would be to set up the panel for the mist approach in advance. This really only requires us to do a couple of things. One is set nav2 to Baltimore 115.1 and set the OBS selection on the reciprocal of 068, the 248 bearing, because as you can see from the mist approach instructions, that will be our climb out bearing to intercept the 11 DME arc of the mist. Not doing this ahead of time could prove extremely dangerous. This is because the distance between the two arcs is only 3.7 miles, and being that you're very close to the ground, your main focus should be on flying the airplane and not setting up the cockpit. Also, it would be a good idea to set the nav to standby frequency on 113.1 Andrews Vortex for the mist approach hold. We will be swapping to this frequency once we intercept the arc. Also, while flying from ZOVAP to the mist, time and workload permitting, it would be useful to twist the DG's bug to our mist approach heading of 248. Doing so will simplify our scan a little during the mist. Now for the procedure itself. As soon as the 060 radial centers, we will, as usual, go for the 60s. Turn. Yes, immediately initiate a climbing right turn to 2,500 feet to intercept VOR number 2's 248 bearing. And by the way, a standard rate turn from 150 to 248 will probably center the needle without any extra effort. Next is time, not needed until we reach the hold. Twist, no way, we will do this when at a safe altitude. Throttle, yes, full power for the climb out. Talk, same as twist, no way, not until you're safe. Finally track, well, yep, track nav 2. At this point, our instrument scanning skills will definitely be put to the test. We need to include many more instruments than we have done so far. As you initiate the climbing turn, you should start your scan from the attitude indicator, as it will give you both bank and pitch. Spend a couple of seconds on it, and then move to the turn coordinator to look for a standard rate turn. Again, a second or two on the TC. Next, move to the airspeed indicator. You're looking for a speed close to or just above VY, and not decreasing anymore to avoid a stall. Also here, a couple of seconds should do the trick. Now move a second each on the DG and VOR number 2's needle. The DG should be moving towards the bug, and the VOR needle should be centering. Now we move 1 second on the altimeter to look for 2,500 feet, and again 1 second on the DME to check our distance from the 11 DME arc. Rinse and repeat the scan at least until reaching 2,000 feet, at which point we can include in the scan VOR number 1. By setting its OBS on 078 already, you will again put yourself ahead of the airplane. It will tell you which heading to turn to when close to intercepting the arc. Follow the dots to find the second heading for the arc of 168. You should rinse and repeat the scan until the DME indicates between 12 and 11.5. Again, this distance depends on the airspeed of your plane.
Once there, we will initiate a turn to 168 to intercept the arc and revert to our arc scan. 2 seconds on the altimeter, 2,500 feet, 2 seconds on the DG, correct the heading to maintain the 11 DME arc, and obviously the DME will be the next instrument, a quick 1 second glance. After the DME, spend another second on the VOR's needle to check our position. And finally, just this once, we will include VOR number 2. 2 or 3 seconds on that, because we need to swap the standby frequency to 113.1, identify the station, and twist the OBS to 055 for the holding fix, boast. All you need to do now is follow the same procedure of the approach arc until you reach boast, which is when the radial 108 centers. If you diligently studied your approach plate ahead of time, you should already know that the entry to this missed approach hold would be a direct entry. If you are not diligent, all you need to do is follow the method we explained earlier. When on the last 10 degrees of the arc, VOR number 1's OBS is set to 108 and you're heading 198, put a pen horizontal on the DG and lift it up 20 degrees from the left side. Split the DG up from the middle and look for the holding radial of 108 on the DG. The front of the DG is teardrop, small pi I cry, and parallel, the larger of the two pies. The back of the DG is instead a direct. 108, the holding radial, is on the back, making this a direct entry. For the hold itself, well, we already covered it earlier, so if you need a refresher, either open the TOC or swipe from left to right until the intersection hold slide. Remain in the hold until either ATC, your examiner, or the EFC time allow you to proceed on the rest of your flight.
We at Pilot Training Solutions hope you enjoyed this latest video production of ours. Again, keep in mind that this video was an extract from our soon-to-be-released IFR Procedures app. When it referenced gestures or content covered previously, it referred to the actual app. When is the release date of it? Well, not sure. We keep adding additional content, tips, and tricks to it. It's definitely going to be out before the end of the year, but no exact release date yet. In the meantime, visit passfaexams.com and see how we can help you ace your written test and check rides on the first try and with flying colors. Till next time, happy flying and blue skies from all of us at Pilot Training Solutions.